it is 30 days to the presidential election, and so far there are indications that the contest will be between 4 candidates. There are Asiwaju Bola Tinubu of the All Progressives Congress, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar of the People's Democratic Party, Peter Obi of the Labour Party, and Senator Rabiu Kwankwaso of the New Nigeria People's Party. Recently, a certain political analogy has been circulating that the 2023 presidential election will be similar to that of 1979 that produced Shehu Shagari as the first democratically elected president of Nigeria. 4 major candidates also contested the 1979 election, where ethnicity was a major deciding factor. There are Aminu Kano, who was from Kano and won only in Kano State, Obafemi Awolowo, who was from the southwest and won the region, Nnamdi Azikiwe from the southeast and also won the region, and Shehu Shagari from Sokoto State and the candidate of the north, who won the presidential election. Now, this theory being spread by the Kaduna State chapter of the Naka Sai Naka Campaign group likens Peter Obi Labour Party to Azikiwe's NNPP, Tinubu APC to Awolowo's UPN, Kwankwaso NNPP to Aminu Kano PRP, and Atiku PDP to Shagari NPN, stating that just like Shagari, Atiku will emerge winner of the presidential poll. Now, their analogy has been dissected and discarded by veteran journalist Mahmud Jega, who says the personalities of the candidates contesting this year's election is nothing like that of those who contested the 1979 poll, and that the political realities of today differs from what obtained in 1979, describing the Naka Sai Naka Campaign group analogy as fraudulent. Mr. Jega says Nigeria has since evolved beyond politics of ethnicity and religion. He joins us now from our Abuja studio. Good morning, and thanks for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
Now, there are those who still think that ethnicity and religion is not something we can easily wish away from our politics, and that it will play a major role in this coming election. What are your thoughts?
Well, there is no doubt that there are many Nigerians who make their decisions as to who to vote for with a large dose of ethnic and religious considerations. But what we are saying is that the situation is not exactly like it was in 1979, in the sense that the personalities involved this time, I mean the major presidential candidates, are very different from those of 1979, and the political parties are also very different in many respects. The analogies that this organization made was bound to deceive some people, in the sense that there is some truth about the ethnic origins of the major candidates. For example, in 1979, you could say there are only 5 presidential candidates in the 1979 election, 1 of them ethnically from the southwest, 1 ethnically from the southeast, and 3 from the north. So they are now saying that, well, this time too you have 1 big one from the southwest and 1 big one from the southeast and 2 from the north. So that one looks true, but it's deceptive in the sense that the political parties associated with them now are not similar in many respects to the ones of 1979. So the conclusion, for example, that PDP is the equivalent of the MPN of 1979 and will have the same spread and reach, and therefore its candidate is issued in for election, is not a correct analogy, or that the APC presidential candidate will, just like the UPN presidential candidate of 1979, win the election only in the southwest. It's a fraudulent analogy, I'm sorry to say.
Thank you very much, Jega, for intervening. I read your short note on this matter. I also read your column on it on Monday. First of all, let our viewers get into the origin of this matter. Let us know what Naka Sai Naka, what does that mean? There are so many people who don't understand what it means. What do they mean by that?
Okay, it's a Hausa phrase. Naka Sai Naka literally means your own is your own. But it is a whispering campaign. You know, they are not doing it too openly, but they are whispering on the social media and on the street that Naka Sai Naka. And what they mean in this politics is that vote for your own, or everybody will vote for his own. In short, they are saying Northerners should vote for the presidential candidate who is of Northern origin. I think that means the PDP presidential candidate, although there are others, but since he is the major one. So that is the nature of the campaign. But in order to support it, they made all these analogies and said, after all, the PDP presidential candidate and his party PDP is like Shehu Shagari and his party MPN of the Second Republic, which won in the north and in several of the southern states, and therefore won the election. And my argument is that no, they are not equivalent. And in particular, you cannot say that the APC presidential candidate and his party are the equivalent of the UPN of the Second Republic, which came second, far away from winning the election. That analogy is false, because you cannot compare the political standing of APC and its presidential candidate with the UPN of 1979 in many, many important respects.
All right. Of course, one understands that an average voter in the northern part of the country is very knowledgeable and very passionate about politics and all of that. But understanding how you have broken it down, comparing the parties and the candidates in the Second Republic and what we have right now, how are people accepting, or how are people viewing the campaign by the Naka Sai Naka in the north?
I don't think it is making a lot of headway. I don't think so. I have not heard too many people talking about it, but of course, those who are promoting it are doing their best in the streets, in the social media, on some FM radio stations, hoping that it will catch on. But I think essentially right now, there is, I think most of the voters in the north are aligned in one way or another to the existing political parties. And I don't think they will be swayed. For example, I don't think APC supporters will migrate en masse to support PDP candidate because of the Naka Sai Naka campaign. They will understand it as a desperate last-ditch effort. And if people want to support the PDP presidential candidate, please let them do so for some good reasons, but not a dangerous ethnic and regional campaign like this, because as I wrote, if every region says, let's go for our own, that is probably the beginning of the end of the whole country.
Now, how do we then situate the aspect of politicians winning perhaps their home states and some parts of their region if you were saying this is a dangerous campaign?
No, to be frank, when you are a major presidential candidate, Nigerians expect you to win your home state. And any of these four major presidential candidates that you mentioned in the report are expected to win their home states. And actually that wins them respect from the electorate, because any candidate, major one, that does not win his home state is regarded as not a very serious candidate. Now, winning your home state is different from winning your home region, especially on the scale that some of the Second Republic politicians were winning their regions. I mean, just to be very clear, in 1979, the UPN candidate, Chief Awolowo, was winning 90% of the votes plus in Lagos, in Ondo, in Ogun, and only, I think, about 87% in Oyo State. Now, in Nigerian politics, if you have that level of support in your home region, it makes people in other parts of the country suspicious of you. Now, a more recent example is President Buhari before 2015, who in 2011 election, if you remember, won massively in the 12 far northern states. And in a perverse way, that made people in the other regions to be very suspicious of him, which was why he won many of these far northern states in 2003, 2007, and 2011, but he couldn't get to win the election because all the other regions didn't really trust him until they were able in 2013 to strike a major alliance, in particular with the ASEAN, with NNPP, and also with a faction of ABGA to form the APC. Now that transformed the situation completely. So the history of Nigerian politics is that becoming extremely popular in one region, even a large one like the North, because as we saw, Buhari won 12 states in 2011. But that only leads to suspicion and rejection by all the other regions. So nobody should aim to win a presidential election based on just the people in his own region. Because, for example, this attempt to mobilize northern voters for a particular candidate, it can't be better than what happened in the case of President Buhari in 2011. You can't do better than that. You can't win the northern states more solidly than President Buhari did in 2011. 12 of them by large margins. 90% in Bauchi, 94% in Borno, but that didn't take him to the presidency until he was able to build an alliance across the Niger. So that's what we are warning. That this is not a winning formula at all, because it could backfire in a spectacular manner.
It's a good point you have made, because even in 1979, and you also reflected that in your column, that the PDP, the NPN, is that when it won states in the north, it couldn't have made the numbers without states in what we know today as the South-South. The South-South actually was a very strong base of the election of Alhaji Shehu Shagari in 1979, the states of the Old River State, Bendel State, and so on and so forth, were able to come together to give that kind of numbers for Shehu Shagari to win. And even the Azikiwe's party won Plateau State at that time because of the strong presence of Solomon La in that state, which we now know today as Plateau, Nasarawa, and Benue states. Now talk about the personalities. I want you to talk about the personalities of Zik, Awo, Shehu Shagari in a sense for MPN, and we also had this man from GMPP, what's his name?
Waziri Ibrahim.
Waziri Ibrahim. And then we had the Talakawa man, Aminu Kano. And now give us a kind of personality as briefly as possible personality portrait of these people compared to Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, that's comparing Awo to Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, comparing Obi to Nnamdi Azikiwe, comparing Aminu Kano to Kwankwaso. I think there's nobody to compare Ibrahim Waziri to, even in this landscape.
Exactly. Well, briefly, as you said, you know, let's say Mr. Peter Obi and his Labour Party, okay, he has made a lot of progress in this republic, especially because he has the social media facility. But the Labour Party is not like the NPP of the Second Republic. It doesn't have the major southeastern politicians being members, and all the southeastern governors, none of them is a member, none is openly supported. And also you cannot compare Mr. Peter Obi, good as he is, with the stature of Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, who was in politics in Nigeria for many decades and was seen not only as a Nigerian but actually as a titanic African figure. And also Labour Party has not really reached out into Plateau State as MPP did. Now, in the case of Kwankwaso, he is also quite a dynamic figure, but honestly, you cannot compare his stature with that of Malam Aminu Kano, who also was in politics, leader of the Talakawa for many decades. And the Kwankwaso's NNPP party does not have the leftist ideology of the PRP. It also does not have the spread that the PRP had into all the Nepu areas beyond Kano, which was in Bauchi and Kaduna and Zaria and Gusau and other places. Now, in the case of Asiwaju Tinubu, there are major differences between him and the politics of Chief Abiola. I mean, the politics of Chief Awolowo. You know, the UPN was essentially a Western regional party in the Second Republic. It won massively in all the states of the Southwest, including Old Bendel State, but it made very little impact outside that region. And Chief Awolowo didn't even have a northern running mate that time. His running mate was Chief Philip Umiadi from Anambra State. And he did some whistle-stop tours of the north by helicopter. And there are many things you could see there. He will stop, do a rally, enter his helicopter and go. He was not visiting the palaces of emirs and other statesmen. He said it was a matter of principle, but I think it was because he didn't expect a warm reception. Now, if you compare that with Asiwaju Tinubu's party, which is APC, which now controls 14 of the 19 northern states. And therefore, it is really the northern establishment party right now. And that's why, you know, he has all these governors. He visits the palaces of emirs, he and his running mate. And he has a very big northern running mate. You said, Ogasam, that we don't have the equivalent of the GNPP leader Waziri Ibrahim in this republic. The closest we have is the APC running mate, which is Kashim Shettima, the former governor of Borno State, who also up to 2019 was the chairman of the Northern States Governors Forum. So he's a very big northern political figure, incidentally from Borno State, where Waziri came from. So right now, the APC campaign is making very big waves in the north with all those visits to emirs, with all those governors attending, even the president, and also holding all those huge rallies. Now, that was the UPN of the Second Republic didn't do anything of the sort because it was really largely confined to the southwestern region. Now, the last analogy was to say that the PDP and his candidate are the equivalent of the MPN. Well, truly, up to 10 years ago or less, PDP was really overwhelming in this country. It controlled most of the states in the north, in the west, in the east, and in the south as well. But since then, especially since 2015, it has shrunk. And really the two regions that it consistently controlled, which were the southeast and the south-south, are also now actually very dicey. In the case of the southeast, because of the coming of Peter Obi and the Labour Party, and in the south-south, especially because of the rebellion led by the governor of Rivers State, Nyesom Wike. So I don't think PDP could be likened to the MPN of the Second Republic in terms of power and political spread and likelihood of winning the election. That's my own argument.
We need to quickly go on a commercial break. When we return, we'll continue this conversation with you. Please stay with us. All right, thank you for staying with us. Before we went on the break, we were analyzing a whispering campaign, as it's been described, tagged Naka Sai Naka by some persons in the northern region, which a veteran journalist, Mahmud Jega, has been dissecting for us. And before we went on the break, he was looking at a self-portrait of some of the personalities that the major presidential candidates were liking to in 1979. But Mike, you wanted to ask
Yes, let me ask you this. I know you've been following and you're looking at the patterns that are going on right now. What do you think will influence the voting patterns of Nigerians in this election 2023? Because you have said that Nigeria has moved from that ethnically based political parties the way it was in the First or even Second Republic. So what do you think are the patterns, things or factors that will influence or change the pattern of voting in this election?
There is no doubt that all the old primordial factors that we talked about would still be important to some degree. But my own hunch is that the most important factor that will determine the 2023 election is the standing of the political parties and their candidates and their spread and their resources and their mobilizational ability across the country. And, you know, if you look at it now, the advantage is really with the APC. Not necessarily because people are very happy maybe with the performance of the APC administration in the last 8 years, but it also does not look like people have migrated en masse to the other parties. And there is also the very important point. You know, in Nigeria, party structures and their mobilizational abilities are very important. If you have federal government and the state governments and also candidates for all the elections, senatorial house candidates, House of Assembly candidates, and you also have local government chairmen and councillors, and all of them are running around in their various constituencies, mobilizing people. In the end, that could be the decisive factor, and especially also if a party sticks together, because that is very important. But if a party, however big and widespread, is riven by factions and rebellions, then obviously that is likely to affect its study. So that is why I said everything considered, it looks like the APC really holds all the advantages. And then the final very important point. You see, not only in Nigeria, like we saw in 2015, but throughout Africa, to be able to defeat a ruling party in the election, the first condition is for the opposition parties to come together. This election that we are going to have in 30 days' time, PDP and LP and NNPP and about 15 other political parties are all jostling against the ruling party that controls federal government and 23 or 24 states. For goodness sake, realistically in Nigerian politics, how do you expect any one of them to be able now to defeat that kind of conglomeration? So at the minimum, the biggest lesson was 2015 when the four opposition parties came together. That was how they were able to defeat the PDP behemoth. And now the opposition parties have thrown away that lesson, but they are running around. Honestly, it does not look very hopeful for them. That's my own take. And don't forget, I have been reporting politics in Nigeria for 32 years now.
Quite interesting. And that's why we can call you a veteran with regards to matters concerning politics. But earlier on, when we spoke about politicians winning their state, you said that this matter of Naka Sai Naka is not a way or a path that we should go, that it would not be good for Nigeria and that it could backfire. I want you to perhaps throw more light on that.
Well, I said it could backfire because there are spectacular examples in the political history of Nigeria. And one example was the UPN in 1979, when you had a candidate who was winning 90% of the votes on average in all the states in his region. And then in other places, even in Anambra State, where Chief Awolowo had his running mate, Chief Philip Omiadi, he got less than 2% of the vote. And in all the northern states, he was getting 1 point something, I think, except in Adamawa State, where for historical reasons, UPN was able to win even 2 senators. But in all the other northern states, including in Benue State, where in the First Republic, Chief Awolowo had an ally in Chief Joseph Tarka. By the Second Republic, the alliance had fallen apart, and UPN got only about 1% of the vote there. And the other example was President Buhari in 2011. He won massively in Kano, in Bauchi, in Borno, in Katsina, in many other parts of the north. But by the same token, it made all the other regions suspicious of him. So he won these 12 states solidly, but then he was rejected in all the other regions, and therefore he never made it to the presidency until he learned the most important lesson, which is to have cross-appeal across the country. And then they formed this APC political party by bringing together 4 political parties, and it made all the difference in 2015. So therefore, 1979 UPN and CPC in 2011 were perfect examples of Naka Sai Naka, which did not win the election. We did not win the election. So why should anybody try the same tactic now, apart from the dangers that it poses to the country? Because if every region, it's for a very good reason that in 1975-6, the military government encouraged the Constitution Drafting Committee to jettison the parliamentary system that we had in the First Republic and adopt the American presidential system of government. And one of the conditions for getting elected as president is to have spread across the country. In addition to winning the largest number of votes, you must also win a quarter of the votes in 2/3 of the states, which is 24 now. Now, obviously, that excludes Naka Sai Naka. If you don't appeal across many regions of the country, you will never get to become president under this constitution.
I believe that this Naka Sai Naka whispering campaign actually was triggered by the PDP presidential hopeful, Atiku Abubakar, when he met with the Arewa group, and he said that Northerners should not vote for an Igbo man for presidency, and that Northerners should not vote for a Yoruba man for presidency. How well do you think this played into this idea of Naka Sai Naka? And secondly, some people believe that if the 2023 election is not going to be about 1979, that it's more likely to look like that of MKO Abiola, because MKO Abiola had the kind of northern coalition that we are seeing now with the APC candidate Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And I remember that time he had also what they call Muslim, what the people call Muslim ticket, in which the opposition in the north were saying that Abiola was not Muslim enough, whereas in the south they were saying that the ticket was too Muslim. And we're not seeing the same pattern playing out.
I agree with you that the 2023 election, if it has any historical precedent at all, is most likely to be the 1993 June 12th election. But, just to clarify, Atiku Abubakar personally is not a regionalist. Actually, for most of his political career, he was more popular in the south than he was in the north, because he is a liberal kind of fellow. And many northerners were thinking that possibly he did not encompass, that he was like more at home with the southern values maybe than northern ones. Now, that statement that he made in Kaduna, I think to some extent it was misinterpreted, because he was saying that, well, I know your problems very well, better than anybody, because I am also from this region. I think he said so in answer to a certain question that he was asked. But of course, his supporters, maybe out of desperation, later on developed that statement into this whispering Naka Sai Naka campaign. Now, you made the comparison between Chief Abiola in 1993 and Chief Asiwaju Tinubu this time around, with many parallels, as you said, like the Muslim ticket. But Asiwaju Tinubu's main strength this time around is really the spread and strength of his political party. Whereas Chief Abiola had a lot of personal contacts across various parts of the country. Because, in fact, in 1993, the NRC was stronger in terms of spread than the SDP, because there were 30 states in 1993, and the NRC controlled 16, most of them in the north, and the SDP controlled 14. And Abiola, therefore, as the SDP candidate, actually started from a position of disadvantage. But because of his massive personal appeal, he was able to overcome that disadvantage and win many critical northern states, including Kano, which was the home state of his NRC opponent, the now late Alhaji Bashir Tofa. But in the case of Asiwaju Tinubu, he is starting on the platform of a political party that has overwhelming control of the region. As I said, it controls 14 states out of 19 in the north alone, and the majority of states in the southwest, and the 2 states in the southeast, and the 2 states in the south-south as well. I think 1. So maybe their strengths are slightly different. One is institutional, the other was personal. But in the end, it will probably lead to the same outcome.
Yeah, but I want to say that it looks like you got that wrong on what Atiku said. Atiku actually mentioned that they should not vote for that it was better than an Igbo candidate and a Yoruba candidate specifically. and that because he is Fulani, he was in a better stead to handle the situation in this country.
And it's okay. I was not there at the forum in Kaduna. I read the stories in the papers and in the social media, and also the reactions and the clarifications that were made subsequently. And that was how I pieced together my own understanding of it, but I could be wrong.
We must thank you, veteran journalist Ward Smith, Mahmud Jega, for your time on the program.